Hey guys, welcome back to the Rhythm Section, brought to you as always by the Mind Refinery. I'm Kyle Bodanis. This week on the show, we're talking about the 20th anniversary of two important albums, White Blood Cells by the White Stripes and Oh Inverted World by the Shins. If you like what you hear, rate and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you have time, follow the Mind Refinery on social media. And now, here's the show. All right, guys, here today to talk about the 20th anniversary of two really important albums, White Blood Cells by the White Stripes and Oh Inverted World by the Shins, is Rhythm Section co-host Coburn Blair. Coburn, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
Well, I'm back in the hosting chair just for for this. I feel good. I feel nervous. I feel pressured because you've been killing it. So we're gonna try to make this shit happen.
I mean, I have faith in you. I don't know if anyone else does, but I do.
I can assure you no one has faith in me. 2001 was a banner year across the board in music. Rock music specifically had a host of impactful records, including the two we're talking about today. Let's talk a little bit about the musical landscape of that time. What was the musical landscape like in 2001?
That is a good question, because I feel like 2001, to me is a very pop-focused year where I think, I guess pop music is always kind of dominant, but I feel like that was at its height, in terms of what we were getting in the mainstream, what we were being, spoon-fed, what was on, the MTVs, RIP, Much Music, RIP, everything. There was no streaming yet. CDs were still being sold. Internet kind of didn't have the culture it does today. I think it's a really interesting time period for music because there were still the kind of control systems of the past, but it wasn't quite what, all the way as good as it was when, the record labels kind of controlled everything.
I mean, yeah, I definitely think it was kind of a weird, almost transitionary year because, Napster is happening and, it's the blowback from that is happening. And I mean, 2001 was part of this indie rock revival with bands like The Strokes and The Hives and Broken Social Scene. And around this time, you start seeing the same kind of thing happening across the pond. It'll just be a year or two away with Block Party and the Libertines. In hindsight, for me, this was kind of the death rattle for the dominance of guitar-based music in the pop world because it hasn't really attained the same heights since. It definitely hasn't in our local indie scene because the early 2000s was a watershed moment for the local Toronto indie scene, especially when Broken Social Scene drops. Forgot It in People, and I think that was just 2 years after this. Constantine's bands like that, and this era was kind of the starting of it. The Strokes album, This Is It, is probably the most influential album for this time. It opened bands for, it would open doors for bands of a similar sound in the US and again be a catalyst for bands like the Arctic Monkeys. What I love about it is it interrupted this new metal onslaught that was happening between 99 and 2002. And I think the White Stripes, who we're going to talk about with White Blood Cells, is ultimately the band with the biggest legacy coming out of this. I think This Is It by the Strokes is going to remain an influential album, but they haven't been able to, kind of hit the same heights since. But the White Stripes were able to go right into the stratosphere and become the biggest band in the world at one point. So, yeah, it's an interesting time, especially for when our first album that we're going to talk about comes out, White Blood Cells. So, in talking about that, where were the White Stripes and the Detroit garage rock scene going into White Blood Cells? How was it? What was its mode?
So I think kind of that scene and that sound, I think there's something special to kind of what was going on there at the time, with what we were hearing. It was, I feel like the White Stripes kind of gave us a return to a rock that hadn't really existed. I think, like you said earlier, talking about the kind of new metal, this is extremely pop punk was super popular, but this was a really stripped down and kind of raw and distilled rock sound. It really feels like American rock, kind of what it should be.
Yeah, this is what American rock is. Because I mean, when English bands took American blues, from the Delta in Chicago, They turned it into something else. They expanded it. They made it a lot more progressive sounding. I wouldn't call it prog, obviously, but in terms of like extended song structures, adding the idea of the epic song to it. But like there was this garage rock scene that was happening in Detroit that would ultimately influenced this garage rock revival, and and that was happening all around the country. So the White Stripes were joined by bands like the Von Bondies, and Bantam Roosters, and who I would check out if you haven't heard them. And also associated acts with the White Stripes like the Greenhorns. I believe actually the bass player for Greenhorns went on to play in the Racon tours. But the White Stripes kind of led the pack, and their first two albums, the self-titled one and Distilled, were really, really fucking good. And if you listen to the first one, self-titled, it is raw as fuck. And like this is the American brand of rock music, like put out by the Stooges. Like the beginnings of punk, and it's stripped down. It's like fucking four chords, and it is just balls to the walls, but still very rooted in pop, like when you kind of unfurl it and pull back the layers. And if you haven't checked those two albums out, Self-Titled and D-Still, I would absolutely recommend them. They are the band at their absolute rawest. But also this is kind of a cool moment for Detroit at the time too, because like Detroit has always invented and reinvented itself as one of the hubs of American music, where if you're looking for what is American music, you can look at Detroit as like from a historical standpoint, whether it's Motown, hip hop, garage rock in the 60s, the revival that we're talking about right now. It's always been kind of a special place with very interesting socio-economic conditions that have contributed to this music. And there is a commonality in the music, whether it's black artists or white artists too, that you hear, just in terms of like the effect of like the auto industry leaving, and Detroit going on on the bad side of prominence and all these things. So like it's this again frames it as a really fucking special place.
Yeah, and I think you can't really contest any of that, because I think all those kind of factors are what make Detroit ripe for creation in the way that it has, right? Like this is why these things can come out of Detroit. This is why Detroit has its reputation, its sound, and so many great legacy acts. So I think the White Stripes kind of blowing the doors off in the way that they did in like 2001. I would call it for me more it's like 2002, because
of the mainstream release.
Yeah, because I don't think I got to the White Stripes or to anything till we had the re-release there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they were shining a light on a different side of music. Like you said, there's pop elements in it. I don't know if I would call it like, I would say like they were almost influencing pop more, or like what influenced pop more was their same influences. So I think yes, there's pop leaning here, but the album it's just really well thought out. It is just like, I don't know, I want to say like the rawness of it, the composition, Jack White writing the whole thing, taking pieces from his earlier work. He's borrowing from Two Star Tabernacle. He's rejigging things to fit. I think there's something really special about that creation.
It's funny, I think it's Dan John Miller. I'm trying to remember the other key member of Tabernacle, and because he directed, I'm pretty sure, the video for Hotel Yorba, which they then recorded, which we're going to get into the videos, but then they recorded We're Going to Be Friends as well. They just did that in one take, and it was him who fucking directed it, I'm pretty sure, if I remember off the top of my head. So when did you hear this album first? Like, what were your initial reactions?
So I think I was one of the ones who caught this album on the 2002 release as opposed to the initial release. I knew it was something special. I think for me, I'll always tie We Are Going to Be Friends to Napoleon Dynamite in 2004.
Yeah.
Because it was used for the opening credits, and it was just like, a phenomenal song usage. But like, I think this album was like an album that like, we put on with friends in a basement, because this was like our first time hearing music like this, and I think that's where the album kind of stands for me to this day.
I mean, the first thing that tipped me off about this album was the Fell in Love with a Girl video. I think I saw it on MTV2. So I think it was 2002 as well. I had heard a couple tracks. I had a friend who was super just like keyed into this shit. But it was 2002 when I saw the Fell in Love with a Girl video, which we're going to talk about. From there, I went and got the album, and pretty much I listened to it like fucking crazy. And it was good to hear that music because I was really into guitar and played constantly and was getting too far down the like Randy Rhoads neoclassical rabbit hole. Not that I was anywhere near able to fucking play all that shit. Pouring out for my homie Randy Rhoads. You know, I enjoyed that stuff because it was flashy and but this kind of pulled me back to basics and pushed the revival of punk at the forefront of my musical taste, because that's what I was really kind of buoying what I was listening to. Punk in Seattle, like really kind of for most of my life leading into my like 16, 17-year-old era. These songs were super loose sounding, and the drumming was like so to the point simplistic. It just slapped, and it gave the music a really primal sound that you could connect with really easily. And like when you wanted to jam out to these songs, like jamming out to these songs is a ton of fun. And it didn't take a whole bunch of talent to play it, but they were about like feeling and mood and energy. And music like that has kind of always won out over virtuosity, right? Because it's about that fucking energy and what it's saying, and what is it saying about your youth, and how's it making you feel in your youth. The big thing I kind of realized right away is how good the songwriting was. That the album is definitely Jack White's coming out party in terms of being a writer who fucking gets it. He doesn't get in the way of himself with grand statements. He goes right for the jugular, singing about like love, fucking the Civil War, and like just like growing up and family and that kind of thing. And I think that's like what's so memorable about it.
I think, it kind of takes me back to like how important music magazines were back then too, because I think that's
100%.
something that I hadn't really considered. Like, I remember reading about this album in a magazine, and that's what kind of turned me on to it. So like, and like publications really got it at that time, and that like it was like the pre-internet community kind of thing where you're like, okay, this is who's telling me to listen to this album, I'm gonna go get this album. And I kind of miss that in terms of like the indie scene and for alternative rock.
I fucking really miss that. Like I was subscribing to what at the time my mom was like, "You're insane." I was like, because I was working at Jackasser, so I had a little bit of cash. I was subscribing to Rolling Stone, so I knew what the old guard was saying. Spin was my favorite at the time, but like Enemy, and then also like the fucking $90, $120 per year subscription to Q magazine, and I was just like I had in my room, I had stacks of music magazines like all the time, and like parting with them was like difficult when I did the mass throwout, because like I have my bookshelves completely ran with fucking books, like half of them on music, but like I had an equal amount of just like fucking magazines. And I miss that, like where you're reading it and like you really know the journalists, because like I still know the journalists now, but I'm not as connected to them as I was then, because I was just like consuming on so much of a regular basis with it. And then also like, listen, here there's like right now there's a lot of choice. You're searching the internet, you're finding what you like, but like when you subscribe to a music magazine and it comes, if it's an artist you don't know, you're like, am I going to throw this magazine out for the month? No, I'm going to learn about the artist. And it was just this age of discovery that for me was a really kind of special moment and kind of like cemented my music nerddom, and it was really good. I want to talk about standout tracks, though. What were some of the standout tracks for you?
So I think for me, obviously We Are Gonna Be Friends is one of my favorite tracks on this. I also really like Hotel Yorba, and I like some of the stuff to the end. I think I think I Smell a Rat. Also is one of my favorite songs on this. Sorry, that was hard to get out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's the songwriting on this album. I really like Jack White's textures. I really like where he goes with the stuff. There's just a crispness about this album, and a crispness that comes through Jack's writing and through the guitar work on here.
Yeah, there's no bullshit with it. I mean, Fell in Love with the Girl is the banger in the album, and but like the first 4 tracks, and like as you can tell moving on and on, I'm like a stickler for how an album opens. For me, it's always my favorite songs in shows are always like when they come out, because there's like an initial energy and fever pitch, and like it hits the anticipation that I really kind of enjoy with it. So you know, Dead Leaves in the Dirty Ground, I fucking loved. Hotel Yorba, and my favorite on the whole album is I'm Finding It Harder to Be a Gentleman. Like, so, but like those 4 tracks, and then fucking Fell in Love with a Girl after I'm Finding It Hard to Be a Gentleman, fucking awesome. They just come out of the gate so good, and the songs are fucking awesome, and they're slappers, and you're just like, I listen to these songs to this fucking day, and it gives me the same kind of feeling and the same kind of intensity, and I really enjoy it. But then there's other stuff as you get later into the album, like I Think I Smell a Rat, Aluminum, I Can't Wait, Now Mary, even like the banging piano on the This Protector, which is like the Meg White thing kind of. Like I love that he's clearly using like an old sounding piano, like one of those older sounding stand-up pianos, and it's just banging away on it, and there's like the imperfections in it and the resonance, and there's just so many things that I enjoy about it. I kind of just let it, the whole thing, play.
So I think I saw on Twitter the other day someone was talking about the White Stripes version of Jolene, and when I was doing some research for this album, I saw that that was included in the Japanese version of the album. Have you heard their cover of Jolene?
Yeah, I love it. It's actually one of my favorite covers, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people have said that, so I think that's a really interesting cover. I didn't realize it was like, you know, done at the same time as this album,
and it's a live show staple as well. Like they play it, like both shows I saw of them, they played it, and it was just really fucking cool because he kind of embraces in his vocals just like the idea of the track, like it's a wail, and it's like this like begging of like don't take this person I love from me, and he kind of embodies that in that cover and when they perform it live. So it's just like really chilling when you see it.
So do you think that Warner Brothers really considered suing over the song Union Forever because every single lyric in that is a quote from Citizen Kane, which is Jack White's favorite movie?
Well, I feel like that's bad press for them if they're doing it, because stuff is taken from lyrics. Stuff is taken from stuff all the time. I don't believe it. Did that actually happen? Like, is there a confirmation?
I've never heard confirmation on it, but there was always like rumors. And I think like, you know, back then when the internet wasn't as like solid now, I feel like rumors floated around for a lot longer. So I've never heard any confirmation on it, but I feel like it's something I've read, you know.
Yeah, back in the day when you were like, yeah, I read this on the internet, and your parents were like, that's bullshit. And no, it's
and nowadays your parents are reading things on the internet, and you're like, no, that's bullshit.
No, that's bullshit. Vaccines actually don't make your penis fall off. Like let's be serious here. You will not get an eye twitch from fucking this vaccine. What were your thoughts on the videos? The Fell in Love with a Girl video was a major boost to them getting a larger audience. Like it was a really cool, like the Michelle Gondry video was really cool for it.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that too, because I feel like, like you were talking about watching it on MTV2 back in the day. Do you think that, you know, videos had a larger impact on getting artists out there than they do now, or do you think that, like, you know, the right video could do it in this day and age?
I think the right video can do it in this day and age too, but I think it's not just the song now. Because I think back in the day, like before streaming services, you like more of your exposure to new music was coming from, like, new music sonically was coming from what was going on, whether it was Much Music or MTV2, whatever, right? Like there's a whole generation of Canadian artists that I listen to because of Rhapsody and you know, Coast to Coast, like, you know, on Much Music. So I think it's kind of different. Like now it's like, what's that Little John video? Is it where, I'm trying to remember what the name of it is, where it's like it's crazy and it's the two people fighting and they're jumping through the ceiling and shit. I'm trying to remember.
Bia?
Yeah, I think that's the one it is. But like, so like now it's like you see the videos and they're cool, right? Like I remember the This Too Shall Pass, the OK Go video where it's like the Rube Goldberg machine stuff. I wasn't like, this has turned me on to OK Go. I was like, this video is dope and I want to see more Rube Goldberg machine videos, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think now too with like YouTube, it's like if you want to go see a Rube Goldberg video, so you can just click a link and you can probably hear it with, like, you know, whatever like Little Pump playing in the background or something. You know, it's not like as tied as it was back then. But I
Yeah.
think with this video, the Fell in Love with a Girl video, like you said, it was an era when, you know, a video was your introduction to an artist. And I think that, you know, if you were smart about what you did with videos, they could break you in new ways. And yeah, I think it is really interesting that videos were, you know, the first foray for a lot of artists. And like, you know, OK Go came to my head like it did yours for like, you know, crafting videos that got people talking.
But I wasn't like, these are landmark records. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's what it wasn't. Like now if I want to go sample an album, I can. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
this is one reason why I wasn't totally against Napster and felt bad, because like I use Napster to figure out which albums I wanted to buy. So like my album buying actually increased when Napster came out, because I was like, oh, this album is cool, I totally want to buy it now, rather than it's junk. So like the internet for me like has like been the rabbit hole of musical discovery when it used to be music videos.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting change, you know, looking back at these two albums that are, you know, 20 plus or 20 years old on the dot. It's how did we shift things? And, you know, the more things change, also the more they stay the same in terms of like Napster's not that much different than Spotify.
And they were completely against it.
Yeah.
And they're not equally fucking over the artist. They are, but in different, you know what I mean? Like different ways. Yeah, I mean, like what were your like so did you like both of the Michel Gondry videos on this? Like were you
I did, yeah, I did. Like I remember these were videos that like, you know, like there was different aspects of virality at the time. In terms of like these videos. So I think that like, you know, bringing on an auteur to get videos done mattered more at this time. And I think there's more to talk about, I think, in this era of music videos than there is now.
I think it's because you have celebrity, like I'm not saying you don't have celebrity music video directors now, because you have like X, and you know what I mean, and you have, you know, these people, especially coming from hip hop. But back then you had Michel Gondry, Chris Cunningham, fucking Spike Jones, Hype Williams. You know what I mean? Like these guys, when they put out a video, it was almost like they were releasing a film and you had to see it. You know, and Michel Gondry put in work on this album, like with Fell in Love with the Girl and Dead Leaves in the Dirty Ground. Fell in Love with the Girl, like the whole Lego thing, and is really kind
Lego
of
thing was so cool. That was so cool.
It was fucking really fucking cool. And then his video for Dead Leaves in the Dirty Ground, where it's like Jack is returning to this home in London that's all like destroyed, but there's like projections of scenes of his relationship on the wall, and like it was just like really fucking cool. And like even the video for Hotel Yorba is like really nice and sweet. As I said, I believe it was directed by, I believe his name is Dan John Miller from Tabernacle. So like that's the thing, is like it doesn't, like these videos produced celebrity directors who would eventually go on to direct like feature films, which actually worked out for X too. Like, was an example. It's just they're becoming fewer and far between, because now like that shooting is a lot more like democratized, and there is like release methods that are easier. Like everybody can shoot a music video. I mean, that's how the Mine Refinery started. It's how I started in the film business, was just like shooting music videos, because you can.
Yeah, and I think with the, you know, the democratization of it, it's changed the way that kind of music is thought of and listened to. And like I think that, like, you know, if you can do something really good with a really small budget, because I think that's, you know, also changed now, where it's like artists have a lot smaller budgets to work with for music videos for the most part. So I think, you know, we're getting more special directors kind of popping up because they're doing a lot with a lot less.
No, absolutely. You have to. Like the budgets have, I mean, they contracted for a period of time. I feel like now they're trying to they're expanding a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
So like, how did this White Stripes album influence pop music? Like, how did it how did it change the way we looked at it? Because I mean, there's definitely a post White Stripes move in it.
So I think, like, for me, this album at the time felt like a return to a prior era of rock that, like, I know existed, but also maybe is a little bit of a fantasy. like the stripped down sound and like the kind of bluesy notes and influences in it. It felt like it was almost like a purposeful affront to the kind of gleamy pop that was also of the era. At the turn of the century there,
Hmm.
like the Y2K kind of stuff. So I think like it just reminds me of like the post White Stripes era. Just reminds me of like all the kind of television shows that would use music to kind of like add to the show, or like like the OC and all these other shows that had bands on or used music. I feel like kind of owe a lot to the White Stripes,
Oh,
if
absolutely.
that
I
makes
mean,
sense. Yeah.
no, it totally makes sense because like for the OC, it's like Phantom Planet,
Yeah.
and the Phantom Planet makes their worst song on that show. Which is, I mean, yeah, the whole thing was like, how can we tie in this band who's also on the label which is owned by the company that owns the show as well, you know what I mean? Like they was definitely used as the the cross marketing thing, and it continues to this day. I mean, if anything, Jack White is a minimalist and a classicist, and despite the often rugged nature of his music, like I will hold that it's poppy because the music it comes from is poppy. Like if you look at garage rock in the 60s, like it comes from like surf music, you know what I mean, and that kind of thing, and like as its influence. And like if you, especially when you wade through the feedback and the vintage sound, you hear this. So you heard what they were doing in bands like the Black Keys, whom White at one point had a beef with, which was completely of his creation, and dudes like Kurt Vile, and eventually English bands like the Arctic Monkeys, and a host of other bands that kind of would like strip it all down and just you know verse, chorus, the very simplistic songwriting styles, and a way, as I was saying, like this is a thinly veiled return to rock music that has its roots in pop, as opposed to like all the new metal shit that was happening, because it just bloated it and didn't like. Sometimes being basic is good. It doesn't necessarily, it's not a pejorative. It's a way of stripping down things and getting rid of the complications. And I mean, Jack White would eventually go on to start Third Man Records and produce for like Loretta Lynn, and like even like collaborate with Beyonce. Like he did that song on Lemonade, and it was really good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I can't believe this album was recorded like as fast and hastily as it was
Oh yeah.
for its lasting impact, right? Like, didn't they record it in something like a week or 2 weeks or something like that?
Yeah, this is recorded in like 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure they just used nothing more than like an 8-track recorder. It may even been a 4-track recorder. I mean, like when he first started, like he was big into vintage recording techniques and stuff like that, to the point where he parodied himself on Portlandia. But yeah, like it's amazing how he worked. But like that's what it was back then, right? Or it still is now, where it's like we have a finite amount of money and we got to go in and we just got to blast this thing out, and like your band went in prepared for the studio experience.
Yeah, so I think that kind of isn't really as encouraged anymore, and I think that has kind of shifted music for that reason. And I think that people like Jack White, who are kind of more purist, it adds something to the music and to the way that it comes out, and I think that like feeds into what has made his music stand the test of time.
Yeah, and one thing I would say definitely is that like the do-it-yourself stripped down ethos that the White Stripes and a lot of these other bands had, hip hop has really adopted. Like hip hop now, they're like, I have the ability to record in my basement, so I'm going to do it. I'm just going to make a mixtape. And it's interesting that it was like this idea was picked up from that side rather than the rock music contemporaries, or more so like the ones in the future, like because not many people really kind of maintain this. I mean, like you're looking at bands like War on Drugs and shit who are embracing that kind of thing in their early albums, but it's still it's a relic of a bygone era almost, especially on the rock front. But like how did this lay the groundwork for their follow-up Elephant, which is ultimately their fucking like their opus?
So I think this perfectly kind of set up Elephant. I think Elephant coming in 2003, but it really came on the heels of this album in a different way because of the re-release and the structure of blowing blowing them up a year before. So I think that they took a lot of the elements that made up White Blood Cells and they kind of improved upon them. They attacked it with the same kind of ethos of, not too much perfection. And then obviously, having like the massive hits on it that it did, like Seven Nation Army opening, like doesn't really hurt you too much.
Definitely not.
Um, so yeah, I think they were kind of like just kind of ready to go out the gate. Like they just had it kind of down pat in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to the self-titled and D Still, like they're super pretty rugged records, especially the self-titled. I think with D Still, they start moving more into it starts to explore Delta blues and country ideas in earnest. But like White Blood Cells is a fully formed idea that is moving to a little bit more finish on the songs, but still maintaining like that rugged situation. But definitely, it's made for a wider audience, and it represents the best songwriting of Jack White's career to that point. You know what I mean? And I think White Blood Cells sets the stage for that larger expression that is Elephant, which is a blockbuster album that, and like you feel it when a band is ready to do that, and they keep improving and leading up to their opus. And I thought that they did it well, and they ultimately changed music with Elephant. So like it's pretty crazy how they were able to do it. Like it almost feels like there is a very concerted song path to do it, although I don't know if that's the case. But because after Elephant, what they do is they start, it's more about experimentation and making different types of sounding albums, because like Get Behind Me Satan and Icky Thump are like much different than their predecessors, in my opinion. They start going out experimenting with different instruments and different instrumentation and what that looks like, and even more doubling down all their different their different tangents and different things that they were listening to. And then in like even in the Detroit scene, you start seeing the effect of like an album like Elephant coming out with song like different bands coming out like Blanche, which is connected to White's, Jack White is close with, and just the effect on it from a local scene, and then just like in taking the next step in pop music, in rock music, is just very apparent, and it's really cool. But like, to kind of finish up this part, where does this sit in their career in your opinion?
So I think Elephant's kind of 1A. This album sits at kind of 1B for me in their discography. They're definitely my two favorite projects by the White Stripes, and I think they just kind of cohesively click for me and have a place in my like head, in my heart, and in the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the entire music world will tell you it's their second best album, and I think that's totally fair. Elephant was a phenomenon, and when it dropped, the White Stripes became the biggest band in the world and one for the ages, and that's the type of album people listen to when you're gone. But like, my favorite is White Blood Cells. The album meant so much to me at the time, and although I'm a massive fan of the White Stripes and Jack White, I just this and what they did when they moved on, this one just continued to loom large for me. I've seen the Stripes twice, Raconteurs 3 times, Jack White solo once, and the Dead Weather twice, and this is the one I can't stop listening to. And Elephant too. I listen to all of them, but like, this one is just, it goes straight to the veins for me, and 20 years later I'm still listening to it, so it's absolutely fucking fantastic. On that note though, we do have to leave the White Stripes and move to our next the album we're going to talk about, enjoying its 20th anniversary. One of the other important records from this moment, Oh Inverted World by the Shins. Frontman and principal songwriter James Mercer had this to say about the album and what it meant to his career. The record gave me the life I never really dreamed I would have. It opened me up to the whole world and gave me validation. It's also something that stands as a bit of a pinnacle for our band. You release that first record and it's so well embraced, but you're always trying to get back that magic, I think. We've done well, certainly, but the fervor that happened around Oh Inverted World, we never really quite reached again. It's a special moment when you're a new band and you got what's apparently a kind of a new sound. This record symbolized a very special moment in my life, a watershed moment for sure. Where did this album fit in the music of the time? How did it contrast with the other bands popping off at the time, like the Strokes and the White Stripes and the Hives?
So I think, like, this album for me kind of fits in with those, previous bands mentioned, but there's a certain left field kind of element. I don't know if it's because they were coming from what, like, was it like New Mexico or something like that? It was just like a different kind of look at the world, it felt like to me. There's almost like an innocent quality to it. Feels like a feeling of yearning that, isn't as present in some of those other bands, at least to me. Yeah, this album's probably one of my favorite albums of 2001 for some of those reasons. And yeah, I don't know, it just struck a chord. It felt different
No, I think that's completely
to
fair
me.
because there's an earnestness in this music that those other bands don't have. Especially like the Strokes. If you look at the Strokes as like one of the like the and that and is this it coming out, like they're not earnest at all, the Strokes, right? Like they're like smoking cigarettes and blasting Pabst Blue Ribbon and talking about fucked up situations that happen to them in the Lower East Side, all this kind of shit. And and them and the other bevy of like the bands that led to the mainstream rock minimalist situation that took the world by storm, like they're a lot different subject matter wise than the Shins. And the Shins create like one of the newer blueprints, because like obviously bands like Modest Mouse, who heavily influenced the Shins, like they're one of the indie rock stalwarts. You go back to Dinosaur Jr. and stuff like that, but the Shin creates like a modern view of indie rock that is created, and that bands kind of go on from there to try to copy, because the music was able to hit such a fucking tone with people.
Yeah, and I think, like they, like the Shins were touring with Modest Mouse. They were kind of like, in line with them. They kind of came out of the same scene, somewhat there. I think even going back to Sub Pop, to get into the label like a bit. I know we'll get kind of deeper into that, but I think that like anyone who heard this at the time knew it was something special and knew that there was something that made it stand out and it was unique even
So
within
when
its
did you first
genre.
hear it? Like, what were your first thoughts?
I think I probably didn't hear this album in full till like 2006, just because of how old I was at the time and because of, how I was consuming music. But I remember reading reviews for it in Chart Mag or one of the many music mags that, I would get. So I think that like this album for me, when I first heard it the first time, like it really takes me back to a younger version of myself. It really, reminds me of high school or middle school. And yeah, like I think you said like earlier, just the earnestness on this album, it just has a special quality
Yeah, I
to it.
really didn't hear this album until like a couple years after it came out, because I was so on the White Stripes tip. That was, and I was into things that were a little bit more aggressive at the time. And I was also like totally immersed into hip hop, so I wasn't really hunting for it. Then I feel like a girl I liked told me about it, and then all of a sudden I just decided to devour it like crazy for obvious reasons. I didn't really react to it emotionally until later on, when I was reading about James Mercer and his road to his career in music. And in an interview, he was talking about how he dropped everything and moved, he moved north. I believe he ended up moving to like Olympia. I know they're based out of Portland. I think it was Portland he may have moved to then. I didn't know if he went directly there, because Sub Pop is based in Seattle. And he left a relationship behind. He quit his job and his friends. He went to a new city in the hope that this thing was going to happen. And in my life, a lot of the same thing was happening, minus the meteoric rise. It was more of a drudging warlike attrition for me. I kind of like really identified with that. And it became more than a collection of good music. And I started listening to that. And I think in tandem with Wincing the Night Away as well, which is another album I fucking really love by them.
Yeah, do you think like does this album stand out for you the most within their catalog?
Yes. I think this and Wincing the Night Away are the best, but I think this is much better.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you there. I think not that like, I feel like this is kind of like bottled lightning in some aspects, in some regards. Like they've captured everything that they, were about and everything that they would become and they bottled it in this album.
Yeah, like it's, you have your whole life to make your first album, you know what I mean? Like it's you get it just came together for them, and they've released good music since. And but like it happens, right? Like it happens. What were some of the standout tracks for you?
Caring is creepy. Love that song. And then I think I go right to New Slang, and I think that kind of sounds like easy. Obviously, like it's a huge hit, but it's really really good, and sometimes
It's
everyone's right.
good.
Yeah,
No, absolutely. It's really good. For me, I loved a new slang. Know Your Onion, I loved as well. Caring is creepy. Honestly, my favorite's the closer, Past and Pending. It's really fucking good. And it's a song I used to listen to over and over again because it's very much about James Mercer coming out of a relationship, changing his entire life, not knowing what the fuck is going on, like the sorrow that came from that. And I just like kind of really identified that in my life. It was just like a really intense song for me. Yeah.
yeah. I think you're right on that one too. I think the closer is really good. This album is just the perfect. It's just like a perfect album to me. It's like up there with albums I think are like just front to back really really good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like it injected life into sub pop. I think people kind of underestimate how on the rope sub pop was at the time.
Yeah, I think just kind of Sub Pop being that Seattle band, sorry, the Seattle brand for a long time, being grunge like headquarters, and then trying to expand and setting up offices everywhere. They get the cash infusion and ownership from Warner, and I don't think they really found their way back until they kind of like made everything small again and shrunk their operation and moved back to Seattle. And then I think the Shins kind of give them that edge again, and they've kind of managed at that point to get back to what they were about, in the early years of grunge. Even though the Shins obviously aren't grunge, but there's something special that kind of reminds me of the Soundgarden and the Nirvana days here.
I think the issue with sub pop is like the business model to a point wasn't sustainable, especially when they went through this period of time, and they didn't know how to reinvent themselves at the time. Like Sub Pop was dwindling. Like there was a massive hangover for its role in the Seattle scene, propelling grunge into the mainstream, as acting as one of the most important, underground labels in American history. They signed this partnership deal with Warner's. They gave up 49% of the company, which injected this kind of like corporate culture into the label, which split the original partners, Jonathan Poneman and Bruce Pavitt, two guys I've read so much fucking about because I was like super like I got to start a record label when I was younger, then realized it was a terrible idea. Because there's this huge seismic shift in the company, and Pavitt left in the late 90s, early 2000s were a bit weird for Sub Pop, entered the Shins. The record does super well. It kind of reinvigorates them like into a new era. Now the Shins are there. They represent like Fleet Foxes, Father John Misty, the Postal Service. They did a couple albums with Sleater Kenny, Mets, The Go's, fucking Beach House. Like it just continues. But like people underestimate that Sub Pop was completely irrelevant at the time and almost kind of represented the death of the alternative music era. And Seattle is a musical
Like,
powerhouse.
yeah, like like with Sub Pop, like out of this like 6 gold albums that the label has, like 3 of them are Shins albums, one of them being this Inverted, Shoots, and Wincing the Night Away.
Yeah.
So like that's carrying the label on your back, I'd say, to a certain degree. And they're a marquee act, and they carried a lot of weight.
Yeah, I think that people underestimate that. And like there was like this is and it kind of is what caused a lot of people to sign with them like moving forward to actually have like a sustainable business model. I mean, like what's really ironic is that one of the older Sub Pop ideas, they used to have this subscription service for fans where you'd pay a fee and you get new singles every month from like cool bands. And this, of course, dates back to the Sub Pop compilations that were mailed out to fans, like the mythical Sub Pop 200, which would have like early singles by Nirvana and such. By the way, if anybody has a vinyl copy of Sub Pop 200, please send it my way. I will buy it from you. But I digress. Because Sub Pop originally signed the Shins to like a 1 single deal when they were opening for Modest Mouse. They saw them in like where did they see them? I think it was like San Francisco. And Modest Mouse is fucking awesome. If you're not listening to them, please listen to them as well. And then they did New Slang. They put the album as part of their like 7-inch single series, and then it ended up selling really fucking well from the promotion. And they fully signed the band, and the rest is history. And like they kind of helped rebirth this American institution. Like it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important piece of American music history. I think, you go from like Bruce not talking to the label co-owner for like 6 years.
Yeah, it was intense.
Like, like that whole thing could have fallen apart without the Shins, I think. I think that the Sub Pop, gets looked at a lot differently if it falls apart in 2000 and 2001.
Yeah, and I mean, it would put Warner's in the bad position too, because like Warner's only owned 49% of it, so they can't just
Yeah.
wholesale kind of close it. Like the thing would just be destined for bankruptcy. Like that's really was where it was going, because like you're trying to have these operations and do A&R and all this kind of stuff, but the label isn't really making money except off its back catalog, which it's now giving almost half of that away to. It could, like, it's getting cannibalized by Warner's. It's not necessarily going back into the fucking business. So like it's a weird time too, because like that label is really fucking important. It is one of the most independent important underground American labels. And I mean, it's credit to the Shins for helping prop it up, and then from there it just, once the Postal Service and shit started getting into it, like even though they weren't moving tons and tons of albums, like they were, like these bands, they toured relentlessly and they were able to create something that actually kind of fucking worked out. But New Slang did have another life again with Garden State. Can you think of a song that was more associated with a movie, like in the last fucking, like since then?
I was really trying hard to
Yeah.
come with something. I feel like I'm scratching my head still. It is really iconic scene. It's really, its inclusion in there is like super like important to the movie. I can't really think of one off the top of my head. Like I want to reach for like a Jordan Peele inversion song that he did with like I Got Five on it, but I'm not sure that there is one.
Yeah, all the ones I could think of off the top of my head ended up from being like 2000. So like immediately I thought about Dry the Rain from the Beta Band that was in High Fidelity, because remember he's like, I am now going to sell 5 copies of the 3 EPs by the Beta Band, and then it turned everyone on to what the fucking Beta Band was. I started listening to the Beta Band. They're awesome. I still listen to them. But like, and then like the other one was like Tiny Dancer from fucking from Almost Famous. Yeah. And but then they, I think those are both 2000. So it's like the only other one that kind of like it's my association is Ball and Biscuit from the beginning of Social Network in the opening scene, which is a White Stripes track from Elephant. But like other than that, I'm just like, what the fuck? Like I can't think of another one. When did that 3-6 Mafia song, what was on that? Was that on Belly or was that on Hustle and
Oh yeah, Hustle and Flow with
Hustle and Flow,
Ludacris and Terrence Howard. I
Yeah.
guess that's kind of up there. What about Lose Yourself? Is that like, does that count?
The only reason I'm like, does it count, is because it's like a song, like it's a song from the soundtrack. Like, sorry, it was like created for the movie. But like, yes, if I was to say if there was any competitor, that would be the one. Like I was going through all these like movie and song combos from 2000, like the 2000s list, and Lose Yourself and this one were like on the top.
Yeah, for sure.
So where does
something I'm missing, but I can't
no, this is what I'm saying. I'm almost pretty sure. I would like, if anybody has some ideas, hit us up via Mind Refinery Twitter. We definitely want to fucking know. Let us know. So to close this, where does this rank in their discography? I think we kind of already touched on it.
Yeah, so it's in their top 2, and it's not number 2. I'll let you know that much. This album is, pretty flawless, at least for me. Yeah, I think this is better than Shoots. It's better than Wednesday the Night Away. It's their best body of work, and yeah, just even playing it back now kind of took me back to the first time I heard it, and I kind of had to re-download it, and it's gonna be in my rotation for probably the next 6 to 8 months. So
it doesn't sound old. It sounds like something that could come out now. Like it really does.
Yeah.
And for me, it's their best.
If someone else is making this quality music now, like, let me know who it is so I can get to listening to them.
Yeah, the only bands that are really doing that are fucking War on Drugs, and I need these motherfuckers to, put out an album this year. Like, that's one of my more, like, anticipated ones to come out. But yeah, it doesn't sound dated at all. It's fresh, it's good, and James Mercer is still around. I mean, like, he's worked with Danger Mouse, he was in Broken Bells. Broken Bells was fucking awesome.
I love Broken Bells.
Yeah, they're really good, and they're a quality band, and this is their contribution to the ages. On that note, though, we're gonna get going. We're not going long, but we're going anyways. Coburn, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right, guys, we'll see you later.